What's up guys, Jake with East Coast Polishing here. So today I'm going to be working on polishing out an actual MacBook Pro. We're starting out at 180 grit on a rotary to try and get this protective coating off here down to the raw aluminum. Never really done this before, so we're going to see how this thing works out. Anyways, we're going to get at it. There it is. All right guys, so now I've ran my 180 grit through this piece. I'm gonna jump down to 320 on a DA to kind of break up the sanding pattern. And as a little disclaimer, I don't recommend doing this if you do have a working MacBook and expect to walk away from it. There's a lot of heat throughout the entire polishing process, and we're not responsible if you mess up your MacBook. All right guys, so we finished on our 320 DA. Now we're gonna be jumping into our 600. We're gonna run that on a DA, and from there I'm gonna go into the buffing process. I'm gonna teach you what I'm doing with the buffing process and why. But first we gotta get this out to 600. You could go all the way to an 800 grit process if you wanted to. 800 will speed up and make it a little easier. Personally, myself, I say you can buff anywhere from that 400 range on a softer grade of aluminum. On most aluminum though, 600 seems to be my favorite go-to. Now, there is the option always for 800, but that is kind of the cap on the sanding grit on the highest I would ever go. Anyways, we're gonna get into 6 here, get this D8 out, work out the 320, and then we're gonna get right into buffing. $600. All right, so now I'm gonna start the polishing process. Now that I'm out to 600 grit, I got that glazed out, so I know it's a perfect 600 grit sand on there. Made sure to go over everything a lot. Now I'm gonna break into using 121 Triple E compounds on a double stitch airway. It is an orange buff. I have a centerless flange mounted. I'm gonna be running around 3,500 RPMs. For anyone that's just getting started in polishing, I recommend raking out at a lower RPM as it's just easier to control. For your first time raking, I recommend around 2,600. That's gonna give you the least amount of rip on the rake. You're gonna be putting your rake behind your handle right here. You're gonna be putting it in, and you just start the buff and let this run. You put a little bit of pressure into this to really break up the fibers of the buff. The time you're gonna be raking these buffs is when you add too much compound, or after a while of using a cut buff, it's gonna start to turn silver on the tips. That's when you wanna break up the fibers so that you can ensure you're actually letting the compound get taken into the buff so it all works together, and that's what's gonna create a good shine and a good pop out of your metal. Now you're gonna take your compound, you're gonna put a good amount on the buff. I like to spray a little bit on the piece I'm working on too, just so I can use all the extra rouge. When you add from here, you're gonna be spraying it at the ground. Wherever you add, there's always gonna be some kind of sling off of it. So I like to try and get the sling onto the metal I'm working on. That way I'm using all of the material. Whenever you add rouge, you don't wanna add rouge in front of your handle. It's gonna try and pull the rouge out of your hand. You wanna take your rouge from the outside edges, and you wanna try and add it behind the handle. That way it sprays straight. As you keep working with it, you're gonna better understand where you're shooting, and you're actually gonna be able to kind of aim where you're shooting your compound. Now that we have a proficient amount of compound on there, we're gonna start the actual buffing process on this edge, and you're gonna see me work it probably in a half section throughout this thing until I get to the outside edge, then run the other way so I don't catch and possibly ruin this piece. So now that I've buffed at 3,500 RPMs with my double stitch orange airway and 121 compound, I'm gonna drop down to 2,200 RPMs using Q36 and a UBM buff. Using this, I'm gonna rake it out the same way as before, add compound, and now I'm gonna go in, and the main goal with this is to knock down the hashing and add the color and pop. With the Q36 compound, the reason I use that as my mid-stage versus the usual green is with the Q36, if I find that I do have a little sand mark pop out to me, I can speed this grinder up to 3,500, add a little more compound, and I can work that sand mark out. Then from there, I'll slow it down again, and I'm gonna work on getting my hash to be a lot more minimum and light. You're gonna see me do one run with a little pressure through it, just to get that color in there. And then after that, I'm gonna lighten up, clean up all the grease and go through and make sure my hashing is nice, and it's gonna give it that waterfall effect of hash. And that's what we look for as polishers, is clean, direct hash and straight lines. Anyways, we're gonna get to it. So now I'm gonna come in with a little bit of the Renegade dissolver spray with a microfiber. The reason so is around this Apple symbol in here, I have a lot of buildup going on of compound. So I'm gonna come in with the dissolver, I'm gonna spray it on my rag, spray a little bit on the piece, and I'm gonna wipe down the entire thing. That's gonna get rid of any of the compound that I have built up on this panel, whether it be a little bit of Tripoli or Q36 left over, so when I come in with my finisher, I can get the best finish possible. When you see me come in with my finish, I'm gonna be using a super finish buff. It's one of our newer buffs we're reintroducing to the polishing industry. I'm gonna be using the purple Show Shine Finish bar, and when I finish, you're gonna see me do something a little out of the ordinary. This piece here, I do wanna get the maximum amount of hashing out of this. As of now, I'm stuck with just the Q36 hash. If you did notice when I cut, you would have seen me cutting on my last pass in one direction with a 15-degree angle like this. When I use the Q36, you would have seen me cutting, going through it with a slight angle like this, a 45 in the other direction. That way I can ensure that all I'm working on is my mid-stage hash out of that white buff. Now I'm gonna be coming in with my purple, and I'm actually gonna be turning to a 90-degree angle. You're gonna see me finishing through this way, and that's gonna let me see the hash. If there's anything going this way, I know I need to keep working that buff in here, trying to pull all the hash out, so all I'm working with now is just that finished buff's hash. That is gonna give me the easiest, most simple result for the least amount of hashing through this. If I wanted to go a step further in hash removal, there is other ways, but for a simple piece like this and demonstration purposes, we're not going any further than that. But that is a little advanced. For a first timer, I wouldn't recommend trying all of that, but it is something to keep in mind as you want to further your knowledge into polishing and skill level, is learning how to minimize the hash down to the least amount. Anyways, dissolver, we're gonna start with that now.
Rid of all the, see all the junk here that's in the Apple symbol and everything else. Picks up all the junk. You have a nice touch.
Thank you, Edward. So now that I've removed all that extra compound buildup on this piece here, I'm not gonna actually go through and wipe off all the extra haze. You're gonna notice that the dissolver creates kind of a streaky finish. Now it does wipe off with ease with a clean microfiber. After you let it kind of harden up for a second, it will wipe off with ease. But we're not gonna go ahead and do that. That's why we're going through with our finish buff now. It's gonna act as somewhat of a lubrication property to our process here. So when I go through here, I'm actually gonna be taking that off of there. There's no need to take another microfiber to it and possibly add a scratch a little bit harsher than what that white buff was. So now you're gonna see me perform that process with the white UMB, and then you're gonna see me with the purple rouge. This buff was already raked out, the same process as our white buff and our cut buff. You're gonna see me when I apply this purple, I'm gonna start from the inside, I'm gonna work it all the way to the outside to ensure that the entire buff is coated with compound. This buff, again, is gonna be run at 1800 RPMs as the max speed. The most minimum I would run is 1400 as a professional, but you can go lower than that if you feel it is needed. So now after I've hit it with my finishing process, there is a little bit of black dotting across this piece here. That is the purple compound still sitting on here. I don't want to take the dissolver that I used previously to this piece. The reason being that I don't want to use the dissolver on it is the dissolver is going to strip those chemical properties that we now have on this from our rouge, which does add kind of a sealant and a protectant to this piece. To not disturb that or get rid of that, I'm going to take this whiting powder here, simply open it, and it's just a small little amount. A little bit goes a long way on the center of my microfiber here. As you can see, not much. I'm going to get this on this piece here. Once it's on there, I'm going to take the microfiber with very little pressure. It's not going to scratch anything on this actual MacBook itself for this very fine polish, and it's going to help remove any of that black dotting that we might have going on here. With this at the end, it's nice because we can simply just blow the piece off. All the whiting powder disappears. It doesn't cause any kind of disruption to our properties that we have on the metal. It also doesn't cause any scratches or excessive marks on the piece. And as you can see now, we turn our table here and open this up. We have just about a perfect polish across this MacBook Pro.
All right. Sounds good, man.
Probably gonna make some kind of picture or video or something.
Smile.
Smile. I don't do that much.
Yes, good.